Hey, 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 hey! Good morning, America!
They could be having their afternoon tea for all you know.
With a pinky like this. Top of the morning to ya.
Yeah, why don't you tell them what this podcast is all about, weirdo?
Okay, sorry. Okay, our podcast. This podcast, hosted by Jonathan Hayashi and Brandon Boatner, Ordinary Radical Podcast, is discipleship, biblical living, featuring conversation Q&As concerning the wide variety of topics to help you as grow disciples of the local church through leadership, discipleship, and mission. Drop the mic. Bam.
Boom. And we want you to know this is our first time ever to record through the power of the interweb. And so right now I'm in St. Louis and Jonathan's in Kansas City area. And so we are recording in a new way.
Man, do I sound like a robot? Hello, this is Jonathan. Nah.
A little bit.
A little, I guess not because I was trying, but.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're also doing video, so, you know, just kind of give it a try and see how it sounds, but let us know, you know, what your comments and stuff like that. Maybe we can improve a few things here. So anyway, hey, the video, you're obviously in a new place. What's going on? I
am in my new church. So right now I'm at Dorset Village, and I was hired I've only been here for like a little bit over a week. So there you go. It's pretty exciting.
That's great, man.
Yeah. So I'm the lead pastor here, merging my church plant with this church, and it's a lot of work, but God has just been like crazy blessing us. You know.
Remix.
Yeah. Remix is the church plant.
And from last episode we talked, like episode 21, the waiting game, and then now this. I mean, like seriously, God's answering prayers, and I mean, so you preached your first sermon last Sunday, right? Your inaugural sermon.
My inaugural sermon, yeah. I did preach last Sunday, and you know, I felt it was good. We got a lot of stuff to work on, but I'm excited about the future.
Dude, I am so excited for you. So this is so weird. Like I moved, and I'm in Kansas City area, and then man, you're Maryland Heights, St. Louis, North Side, well, kinda, and then you know you're at Dorset and Remix, like coming together. That's so cool. That's so awesome, man.
So the heart of Remix is to bring families and people together, and the biggest remix you could do is to bring two churches together. So we're living out the mission.
Yeah, and our listeners are going to be praying for you too.
I do appreciate that.
I'm so excited, stoked for you.
Well, how have you been, sir, in KC?
Dude, it's been great, man. It's been like 4 months now. Just finished the Book of Philippians, and you know I'm in my new office, and you know, I got my hammer! I'm just kidding. But super cool. It was in my office, and I play around with that. You know, when people are in trouble, I just like 39 lashes, but with a hammer. Like Thor, you know, hammer! I wish I had a radio voice like that. So everybody would listen to my podcast. They're like, oh my goodness, I want to listen to Jonathan's voice. So cool. So anyway, it's been great. Yeah. So going back, I finished my first sermon series in Philippians. It was 11 weeks, and now we're in Christmas. Advent series, so it's been a lot of fun. It's been great.
Very cool, very cool. And we have a topic we're going to talk about today. For those listening, this is one that has come up for me just the other day, actually a few days ago. So let me give you the scenario, and we'll hit the topic.
Break it down.
Here's your scenario. I get a call in my new office. Everything's new. Here's a woman, and she says she's behind on her rent, and she's calling around churches to see if churches can help her. And so that's kind of where we're going to go. What do you do when people are coming and they're asking for money from the church? And what do you need to know? What do you need to have set in place? Because every single church will deal with this on probably a monthly basis, and yet people don't talk about it.
Oh man, that's like baptism by fire. The first time you're in the office, you get that phone call, and wow. So yeah, that's baptism by fire for me as well, as we think about it. I mean, like, have you ran into this in the past? I mean, you've been, you know, you have ministry on your belt, and like, you know, but now both of us are, you know, senior lead pastor roles. We got to make decisions on behalf of our church. Like, so, you know, how'd you roll? How'd you go with it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the first thing. Your church is going to have to decide what y'all want to do, and you're going to have to be comfortable with that. That's. It may be totally different than what we do. But we do have a rule. We want to love people well, but we don't give out cash.
Mm.
Yeah. And we have that rule simply because if you give people cash, you don't know what they spend it on.
That's smart. That's smart. But what do you do if they're like, well, I need cash right now because I got to pay. I don't really need money. I need cash, like that kind of conversation.
Well, let's go to why we don't give out cash, because that ties into what you're just saying. I've had drug addicts come to church that are, and they're going to go spend it on drugs, and I can discern that and figure that out by the conversation that we have. And so we want to be careful not to just give someone money that they're just going to, go spend on an addiction or spend on their sin. And the church, we're accountable for that, aren't we?
Yeah. I think there's a great book and a resource. We will put this in the show notes. It's called When Helping Hurts. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times, too, if we just think about like global mission as well, a lot of times, what Americans have done, I'm just saying Americans because, this podcast is here in the U.S., mm-hmm. right? But people have gone to mission trips and they give to certain things and they become a codependent relationship, and it doesn't create flourishment, and it actually just creates a habit that's unhealthy and not helpful. So when we're helping, we think we're helping, but we're actually hurting them. And I think that's the same for, whether drug dealers or people even going through, addiction of alcohol, right? And, we don't really know their stories or their narrative. Mm-hmm. They may be twisting the stories. Okay, so for me, I remember in Chicago, serving there in inner city about, 6 to 7 years when I did my undergrad and seminary. That's where I got ordained. And that was huge. I mean, we were in the north side of Chicago, downtown, inner city, uptown, and there would be a lot of phone calls. And, people would call and make, try to receive money. And one of the first things we would ask is just, we had some diagnostic questions to help us understand where people are coming from, because you got to know asking the right question in order to know really where they're coming from. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like one of the first things I think about Romans 13. Romans 13:1, it says, we are to submit to authorities, right? Mm-hmm. And then what we so often forget is that when we don't submit to authorities, based on that scripture, he says God pours out his judgment. So one of the first things I do is, I begin to ask her stories. So like I'll ask, okay, so tell me about your family, right? So that's one diagnostic question. And then I start asking, okay, what about church, church life? Tell me if you had a spiritual background. It's homeless people and soup kitchen ministry we did, and women's shelter for people on the streets. And another question, it's the second question. Third question I asked, tell me a bit about your job history. Tell me about what are some things that happen. Mm-hmm. And then usually then I ask the question, tell me about, your involvement, and, how you got to the place you are. And, I asked about authorities and so forth, courts. But usually what's interesting to me as I ask, whether teenager gang-related people or drug dealers in the background, one of the questions when I ask, tell me about your family background, they say, well, my parents didn't want me to date this girl that I was in an unhealthy relationship, so I disobeyed and ran away from home. Okay. Well, tell me about your church life. Well, the church told me I couldn't have sex outside of covenant of marriage, union between one man, one woman. So mm-hmm. I hated that, so I ran away from church. Okay. Well, tell me about with your past background with authorities and so forth. Well, I got a ticket because I was driving and I was drunk, and they gave me a ticket, so I didn't have right. Well, tell me about your job. Well, I worked at McDonald's and they told me to wear ties. I said I'm not going to wear ties, so they fired me. Mm-hmm. What literally happened, that person have not only metaphorically but literally brought under the reign of God's judgment, and they're homeless now, because when we don't submit to governing authorities, whether parental authority, familiar authority, ecclesiological authority, political authority, and other authorities, we are saying that I don't want your protection, God. I'm going to run under the judgment and face it. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason we got to be careful when we're giving financial gifts or support and so forth. I think it's wise, as where you're located, especially in inner city St. Louis. There's so many people who are in need, and that's where we need help. So that those are some diagnostic questions that we've asked that's been helpful to know where the people are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have the same sort of questions. I usually ask about what church they attend, because what you're looking at is what people do you have around that could support you before you were to give a handout, right? And probably I would say high 90%. Most of the people that call, they don't go to a church anywhere. They don't have any of that, and and so what we see is that in their time of need, they're reaching out to the church for a handout, and that may not be the best thing that we can do for them. And I don't mean to sound like shallow. I mean to sound just discerning. That may not be the best thing that we could do for them during that time. Let's go bigger, okay? I think that there are things that you can have in place before you have to even really enter that conversation, right? One of the things that is you need to know in your city, if you're listening, Pastor, you need to know in your city what's available to people. The same when someone comes to me for counseling, even though I have a degree in counseling, I don't feel like I should be doing long-term counseling for depression, anxiety, things like that. I want to turn some people over to a Christian counselor. So I want to have these people that I can turn them to. I want to, like in our area, we have something called Loaves and Fishes. We've got different places for food, for school supplies, to stay if you're homeless. You need to know what you have available in your city.
That's a great point, Brandon. I think that's great. Obviously the church is, as Ephesians 3, 2-3 says, the local church, the church is God's plan, the manifold wisdom to be made known through the church, right? And yeah, sure, the church is the answer. Christ is the answer that we could give. But, there are resources out there that even parachurch organizations would help, specifically created to helping, such as homeless shelters, ministries. So when I was up in Chicago, there was something called the Pacific Garden Mission. And there were many avenues of job trainings, opportunities, recovery, therapy, and so forth. And they're there to support and help the ministry of the church. And it was pretty incredible, the ministry, the programs they did. And I think that's just wise to know, even like, for instance, you talked about counseling ministry out there. Sure, yeah, churches can help and equip as much as possible in ways, but, one of the things that the reality is the pastor, being a full-time, there's so much on the plate. So another thing I want to just kind of piggyback and talk about what you're talking about is also delegating some of these tasks to maybe your deacon ministry. So, with our church, we have called the Benevolence Fund and the Benevolence Committee, and deacons serve in that capacity too. And I think Acts 5 talks about that, right? The elders were busy teaching the apostolic teaching of the Word of God, and then there was these widows and needy people, and then we just, they didn't turn them away. They said, hey, deacons, what's the word diakonos, right? Table servers. They came to help in the needs of those, because I think the struggle is for us really as pastors, Christians, as well, I feel like I need to do something. I think you're kind of right about that. I mean, you've heard us quoted, James chapter 1:27, undefiled, pure religion, a blameless religion assists to visiting the orphans, taking care of the widows. So we can't just say, hey, our job is only to preach God's word on Sunday 1 hour. I mean, there's a ministry here that we want to extend. I think about one verse, chapter in Matthew 25. I think it says Jesus divides the sheep and the goat. He says those who have 5 areas: you shelter the homeless, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit those in prison, visit those who are sick. He says those you have done to them, you have done to me. And he says those are the sheep, and then the goat. In fact, in the context earlier in 25, he talks about the parable of the talents. So we are accountable how we use our time, talent, treasure. So, but the question is not foolishly using those talents. We're going to use our talents well for God's kingdom ministry. But I think the important thing is that how do we use it wisely? And pastors can't do everything. So I think there needs to be a wise stewardship of also seeing the external, independent, parachurch organization, whatever ministry that are out there, but also within the ministry who you can delegate these tasks.
Yeah, and something that you said, in Acts, talking about the widows, I think these are people even within the church when we're looking at the book of Acts. And so I think it's totally different if I get a call from a stranger, from something that we don't know, that's hard to follow, that needs money, versus someone in your own church who has a reputation and they come to you and they say, look, we're just hurting in this area. And so your church has to decide. I think we all would lean towards helping the people of our church, but you have to decide how you would do that. Like, I know someone who asked the church for a loan, and we said, no, our church, we don't give loans. We're not going to get into that business of giving out loans, you know. But we have helped many families, and we won't, and still we don't give out cash. We will pay your, we'll pay your, whoever you pay your rent to. We've done that. We've paid them directly. We go buy cards for food, Walmart cards, whatever, and to help people, right? So that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think there's a helpful element that we can give to folks in the church, such as, classes, so financial stewardship, and
financial freedom. Yeah.
I think about financial university with Dave Ramsey, and I think those are helpful things, because a lot of times people just don't know, and there's not a budget. If your church doesn't have a budget, I encourage you to think through how you're going to designate your monies, and just create every year just this amount of this budget from the general account or designated account for missions and so forth. And again, I'm not a financial guru. I mean, I didn't get a degree in that. My master's was organizational leadership, so I took a few classes on that. But really, really protecting your church to say, this is the money that we're designating, we're helpful. And then if we need to, then you can get a church approval to certain monies and certain needs of the church, or, do a special love offering for a certain family. I think those are right things to do, but those are where you really need discernment and wisdom. And I think there's certain people, pray that God will, give you people who are just good in those areas. Pastors, you don't have to pretend you know it all. And we're not saying we know it all of finance. I mean, we're really trying to use from biblical, scriptural, theological guidelines to help us, how can we help people who are hurting, because we don't want to help people in ways that are not helpful, right? So I think those are real daunting questions. But I think when you begin to think through these layers, I think it could be some guidelines, and then that's where every situation, context are different. Mm-hmm. Every culture is different. Urban setting is different from a suburban context. Suburban context is different from rural context. So that's where you just need people speaking in and looking into it. That's what I was.
Another thing that we haven't said is a lot of churches have some sort of food pantry or something like that. My church has that, and people are allowed to come up here and walk through the food pantry and grab what they need. So sometimes you provide for some of the basic necessities and the basic needs, but you say, I'm not going to pay your car payment or whatever, But every church is going to be different. If you have more on this, I want to hear that. If you don't, then I have sort of a turnaround question that I want to ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here's my question. Because a lot of the time the answer, I know, Pastor, you're listening, and I'm sure, Pastor, you hurt just as much as I do whenever you have to say this. But a lot of the time, our answer is going to be no. We can't help you. We're not connected to the person. We've discerned. We don't feel comfortable just giving out this money, or we don't even have it. We don't have, in the benevolence fund, we don't have this money. So someone calls you, Pastor Jonathan, and they say, I'm behind on my rent, and the answer is going to be no. How do you tell them no?
That's a good question. Yeah. Wow. Again, I think creating these kind of like pathways, process in place, rather than reactive, I think proactive ways of thinking that has to go through certain layers, certain questions, and qualification requirements almost. I think those are helpful guidelines to have, rather than just not being prepared. So like, this podcast, maybe it's your first time listening, and just, maybe you've never heard this because you're just a lay person, you're just listening into this conversation. That's something that's worth thinking about. But just say, we need to pray and think through. I think that's genuinely okay. I think that's my practice too in ministry, by the way. If somebody tries to ask me, Jonathan, I need a decision right now, I just say, I really need to pray and think about it. And, anything that goes through. I think time is always good to have in just behind just your time, because a lot of times when we make quick decisions, those are when we make poor decisions, and it can have lasting effect on the body and the people. And there are times that you have to make quick decisions, but I think people want to make close the deal and make a decision on the phone call.
Yep.
And just say, I need to talk to or leadership, and just kind of get back, because there are times that you need to really maybe quickly in the body that you need to make a decision on giving money. But a lot of times I just think when you don't have time to think and pray, you just make poor decisions. So I would just say, just give me some time, get back to you. Can I have your number? Contact or meet in person. I think those are just good hedge of protection to have to not give immediate answer. And even though you heard for the person, I think it's good to listen, but then just say, let me just get back with you.
Yeah.
What would you say?
And I think this is a style difference between you and I. One of the first things I say when someone calls is, I want you to know right now we don't give out cash. I'm going to tell you that ahead of time before we ever talk about anything. I don't give out cash. I can lead you to some resources, and I'm happy to talk to you a little bit more. Oftentimes, that pretty much ends our conversation. Because they do want cash, and they do want it now, right? They need it now. They want it now. And so I'm more, I guess, maybe confrontational, or more like, let's rip the Band-Aid off because it already hurts. Let's go ahead and dive into this. And I'm going to be honest with you. Because I worry that if I start talking to them about their family, start talking about all these different things, set up a meeting, then they're going to get their hopes up. And then whenever I say no, it's going to but you've already done this stuff. Like, you really led me on.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's a different
and
way.
part of it, I do that too. It's because I want to have a gospel conversation with them.
Sure.
I have families who are broken because, FDS, family department services step in, take away their children because there's drugs and incarceration, stuff like that. But usually I ask questions at the end. If I know they're not saved and there's no assurance of salvation, usually I end up reading with the gospel. So, maybe, I guess it's a different style, like you're saying. It feels like people are lured in, but there's a sense that you're listening. You know what I'm saying? I want them to at least know that I'm a listening ear, and also I delegate some of these tasks to folks in the church. And, I already have a pretty a wonderful deacon ministry of folks who are just ready to step in these roles, and in a finance team that can, deal with that rather than me taking it up and running with it.
Yeah. One other option that I've seen in churches that could work, let's say you have someone that has need in your church and they have a good relationship to your church. You may have a role for them that could be a paid role. Like, maybe you need someone to clean the church. Maybe you need something like that. So I've also seen in churches and been a part where we had that person basically earn the money. So yeah, we can get you this. Why don't we help each other out, and we'll have you clean or do something. So, there's some options out there, but it's definitely a hard subject, isn't it?
Yeah. It could be difficult. It could be confusing, and dealing with that. So, I think that's just important for us to remember that every situation is different, every context is different. So that's where we need to really have wisdom to, deal with it and walk through with it. So anyhow, I think that those are good words.
Yeah, and the more you prepare yourself, the better it's probably going to be, right? Just prepare yourself. This is coming. Same thing is true like when I'm driving down the road and I see someone asking for money on the side of the road. And I have a little baggie in my car, and it's filled with crackers and socks and a Bible tract and other things that I can hand them. I don't hand them money either usually. I give them the baggie, or I'll give them a Bible. So you just prepare yourself for those things that are going to come in ministry.
Yeah, that's good. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, it's not the most fun thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you. I experience it at least monthly, but usually more than monthly, talking to someone on this topic. So it's very common.
Yeah. Especially probably your area as well, St. Louis, and I'm more kind of suburban, the greater Kansas City area. So we run into it probably once a month, like you said. But we're probably a bigger church as well. So, but usually what you find out that maybe not this, but I find out like even people who want to get married.
Same.
There's the same story. It's just like suddenly something happened. Nobody would officiate the wedding. Could you officiate the wedding? And usually in those times I have to say no, because I don't know the people, and but they just want somebody to rubber stamp it, and in the same way we just need wisdom there to help through, navigate through issues like that, stuff like that. So, in ministry, there's always curveballs, and, you just got to, I think with experience as well and dealing with that, I think it helps us navigate through some of those things that we don't talk, in Bible college or seminary.
Yeah. Well, it's been good talking to you, Pastor. I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you too, man. I'm here and there. I'm in St. Louis area with conferences and whatever. So
you're so popular. Everybody likes you. I know.
Dude, I don't know about that.
I walked out of my office over here into my office, and I told my administrator, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go have a meeting with Jonathan Hayashi." She goes, "Jonathan?" She was so excited.
Well, she's my agent sister from another mistress. So.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah. So we got this click, going. So, anyhow, cool. Well, tell her I said hi.
I will do that. I guess that kind of wraps it up for us today. What do you think, man?
Yeah, man. Thank you for listening again for the podcast. Hopefully we'll do this monthly again. I know we kind of had a little hiccup, but 2021's coming and it's going to be good. We got great content and resources, and just excited for you, Pastor Brandon, Dr. Brandon Boatner, for all the exciting things that the Lord's doing. And man, have a Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year, man.
Merry Christmas to you too. We'll talk to you later, guys. Bye.
Yeah, ciao.